Good evening, everyone. This is Mal's 101 underground radio station, broadcasting somewhere from Baltic coast. I'm Darta, aka Kaya. I hope all our listeners are in excellent mood today and ready for next story. Today's story is about Baltic Sea, its history and role in the region. The Baltic Sea is far more than just a body of water. It is a geologically young, brackish Mediterranean that has functioned as the economic and strategic engine of Northern Europe for millennia. Mediterranean here means sea amidst land. Baltic nowadays is connecting many lands and countries in region and playing crucial role. Unlike ancient oceans, the Baltic is incredibly young, only about 12,000 years old. It formed after the last ice age, as the Fennoscandian ice sheet retreated. Its history is a dramatic cycle of being a freshwater lake and a saltwater sea. Baltic Sea history starts from ice lake with fresh water. As the ice melted, it created a massive freshwater lake dammed by ice. Next chapter is Yoldia Sea, a channel opened to the ocean, allowing salt water to rush in. But this didn't last forever. Next episode in History of Baltic Sea is Ancellus Lake with fresh water. You might ask, what happens with salt water from oceans? Well, ocean channel will not survive land uplift. We're talking here about isostatic rebound. This land uplift closed the channel, turning Baltic back into a freshwater lake. And now we're arriving to the last stop of Baltic history. It's called Littorina Sea, back with salt water. Rising sea levels breached the Danish Straits again, creating the brackish sea we know today. To summarize all the above, this constant flux created the world's largest brackish water system. Baltic Sea simply has less salt in its water due to river runoff and narrow straits. The low salinity means the ecosystem is fragile and unique, supporting both freshwater and marine species. Now we need to speak about historical role of Baltic Sea, also known as the Northern Superhighway. Before highways, railways, ovoliki and aviation, the Baltic Sea was indeed the road. It connected the raw resources of the north and east with the markets of the west. And here we slowly rolling into the Viking Age, approximately 8th to 11th century. While often remembered for raids, Vikings were primarily master navigators who turned the Baltic into a trade hub. They linked the Baltic rivers, like the Neva and Daugava, to the Black Sea and the Islamic caliphates. The next chapter is Hanseatic League, approximately 13th to 17th century. This is arguably the Baltic's golden age. The Hansa was a powerful commercial and defensive confederation of merchant guilds and market towns. They monopolized trade, moving timber, furs, amber, and wax from the east, Novgorod, Riga, to the west, London, Bruges, in exchange for cloth and manufactured goods. Cities like Lübeck, Gdańsk, and Tallinn still bear the distinct red brick Gothic architecture of this era. And the crucial chapter is the Swedish Empire and Imperial Russia. In the 17th century, Sweden turned the Baltic into a mare nostrum, which could be translated into our sea, which means that Swedish Empire was controlling almost every shore. This dominance ended in the 18th century, when Peter the Great carved out a window to the west, also known as St. Petersburg, cementing Russia as a major Baltic naval power. During the Cold War, 1945 to 1989, the Baltic Sea was one of the most heavily militarized and strictly divided frontiers on Earth. It wasn't just a sea, it was the northern flank of the Iron Curtain. For the Polish People's Republic, aka PRL, and the USSR, the Baltic was a paradoxical space. It was a closed lake for military control, but also Poland's primary economic window to the world. If you try to imagine the geopolitical map of Baltic Sea, you will see it as a divided sea. The Baltic was split into two hostile camps, with a thin line of neutrality in the north. East and south of Baltic Sea was under control of the Warsaw Pact side. The USSR, including occupied Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland as PRL, and East Germany as GDR, controlled the southern and eastern coasts. West side of the Baltic Sea was under NATO. West Germany and Denmark controlled the crucial exits known as the Danish Straits to the North Sea, and thin line of neutrals between two confronting sides. Sweden and Finland lay between west and east. Finland, however, was bound by a special treaty with the USSR, forcing it into a delicate neutrality, usually known as Finlandization. You might hear about the Sea of Peace concept during this period, but it was pure propaganda. The USSR aggressively promoted the diplomatic concept of the Baltic as a Sea of Peace. In reality, this was a strategy to push NATO navies out of the region, effectively turning it into a Soviet-controlled lake. During this era, the Baltic Sea had a crucial role as the launchpad for World War III. For Soviet strategists, the Baltic Sea had one primary purpose: offense. The Soviet Baltic Fleet, headquartered in Baltisk, located in Kaliningrad area. Baltisk was closed military city forbidden to foreigners. The Baltic Fleet was the dominant force. Its goal in a war was to break through the NATO blockade at the Danish Straits to attack Atlantic convoys. The Polish Navy was not independent during this period. It was fully integrated into Soviet war plans. In the event of World War III, the Polish Army and Navy were assigned a suicidal mission: to launch a massive amphibious assault on Denmark and the Danish islands to open the straits for Soviet ships. To support this, Polish shipyards built massive numbers of landing ships, designed specifically to dump tanks onto Danish beaches. While the military planned for war, the civilian economy relied on the sea for survival. The Baltic coast was the wealthiest and most open part of the PRL. The shipyards in Gdańsk, Gdynia, and Szczecin were the pride of the communist economy. Poland became one of the world's leading shipbuilders, but the relationship was colonial. Poland built advanced fishing trawlers, factory ships, and timber carriers that were sent to the USSR, often for transferable rubles, a currency with little real value, rather than hard currency. So the real potential of Polish economy and culture during this era was very restricted by USSR. So it was just a matter of time for such organization as Polish Solidarity to appear. It is no coincidence that the movement that ended the PRL began in the Lenin shipyard in Gdansk around 1980. The shipyard workers were highly organized, saw the economic disparity firsthand, and had access to information from foreign sailors. Another crucial point is the ferry connection, commonly known as the window to the west. The ferry line between Świnoujście and Ystad, Sweden, was one of the few physical links between the Eastern Bloc and the West. Trains loaded with coal and goods rolled directly onto ships like the MF Jan Heweliusz. These ferries were hotbeds for intelligence agents and smugglers, moving jeans, electronics, and banned literature into Poland. Smugglers at Baltic is another huge subject, and we will disclose it in next episodes. You might hear about Baltic Sea as the Lampedusa of the North, in connection with Cold War era. And this is where the real human drama was. Because the sea bordered neutral Sweden and Denmark, it became a desperate escape route for those fleeing communism. The Danish island of Bornholm is located roughly 100 kilometers north of the Polish coast. Thousands of Poles attempted to reach it on fishing boats, homemade rafts, or even by swimming in diving gear. In a famous 1953 incident, Polish pilot Franciszek Jarecki flew his MiG-15 fighter jet from Słupsk to Bornholm, giving NATO its first look at the advanced Soviet technology. The PRL and USSR era left an environmental scar that the region is still healing from. Possibly the worst part of it is chemical weapons dumping. After World War II, the Allies and the USSR dumped approximately from 40,000 to 50,000 tons of chemical munitions, such as mustard gas and arsenic, into the deep basins of the Baltic. It specifically affects the Bornholm Basin and Gotland Deep. As the metal casings rust away today, these chemicals are leaking into the seabed. Another problem is industrial runoff during this era. The heavy industry of the Eastern Bloc had almost no environmental regulations. Rivers like the Oder and Vistula pumped massive amounts of untreated agricultural fertilizer and industrial waste into the sea, causing the massive algae blooms we still fight today. Nowadays, the Baltic Sea is one of the most strategic waterways on Earth, acting as both a bridge and a frontier. For decades, the Baltic was a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and the West. With the last accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, the alliance now rings the entire sea, with the critical exception of Russia. So currently, the Baltic Sea's economic role has shifted dramatically. It is now a dual reality zone. On the surface, it is a highly regulated EU Mare Nostrum, focused on green energy and transparency. Below the surface, often literally, it is a wild frontier of sanctions evasion and hybrid warfare. We will speak briefly about three aspects of modern Baltic economics: fully legal economics, aka the green battery; the gray zone with shadow fleet and hybrid threats; illegal economics, smuggling. The official economy is pivoting from traditional industries like fishing and transit to becoming Europe's critical energy hub. Wind and energy infrastructure is the booming sector. The seabed is rapidly filling with offshore wind farms, like Poland's Baltic Power or Danish projects. The sea is no longer just a road, it is a power plant. Another piece of Baltic economical role is strategic logistics. It remains one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, approximately 15% of global cargo traffic. It is vital for Scandinavian exports, timber, steel, and the import of consumer goods to the Baltic states and Poland. Since the war in Ukraine, floating LNG terminals, like in Wilhelmshaven, Germany, or the FSRU in Finland, and the Baltic Pipe have replaced Russian gas, turning the sea into a critical energy corridor for energy security. But fishing sector is in big decline today. Once a pillar, the fishing sector, cod, herring, is collapsing due to environmental degradation, such as dead zones and strict EU quotas. So it is becoming a minor player compared to energy. Now speaking about the gray zone, the shadow fleet. This is currently the most dynamic and dangerous sector. It involves activities that are technically legal under international maritime law, freedom of navigation, but are used for illegal ends or hostile intent. The shadow fleet is hundreds of aging, uninsured tankers with anonymous ownership to bypass G7 price caps on oil. These ships often engage in flag hopping, changing registration frequently, turn off their AIS tracking systems to vanish from radar, or conduct dangerous ship-to-ship oil transfers in the middle of the sea to disguise the oil's origin. If one of these uninsured zombie ships crashes or leaks, there is no insurance to pay for the cleanup, leaving Baltic coastal states with the bill and the ecological disaster. Sanctioned goods, luxury cars, microchips, are often shipped to neutral countries like Kazakhstan via Baltic ports, but disappear or are rerouted to Russia once they cross the border. And what about illegal economics? It mostly presented by smuggling through Baltic Sea. Traditional criminal smuggling utilizes the complex coastlines and the sharp price differences between the EU and the East, such as Russia and Belarus. Smuggling consists of four major points: cigarettes, amber, drugs, and human smuggling. Cigarette smuggling, aka the ant trade, is massive due to tax disparities. Cigarettes from Belarus and Kaliningrad are smuggled into Lithuania and Poland via trucks, ferries, and increasingly via balloons and drones flying over the border. Amber smuggling, aka Baltic gold, is the illegal extraction and trade of amber, which is a multi-million-dollar black market, largely controlled by organized crime in Kaliningrad. This blood amber is smuggled into Poland and Lithuania for processing and sold globally. For drug smuggling, Baltic Sea is a transit route. Cocaine enters via container ships, often using drop-off methods where waterproof bags are dumped at sea for small boats, destined for Scandinavia and Russia. Conversely, synthetic drugs produced in Poland and Netherlands move north. Human smuggling is darkest part of Baltic illegal logistics. Criminal networks use the Baltic states as a transit corridor. Migrants are moved across the Belarus border and then smuggled via trucks or ferries toward Germany and Sweden. So, today, Baltic Sea has crucial strategic role in region. It is a strategic fortress, also known as NATO Lake, with Finland and Sweden recently joined NATO. It is energy engine. The sea has pivoted from being a transit route for Russian gas to becoming Europe's energy independence hub, housing vital LNG terminals and a rapidly expanding network of offshore wind farms. Thank you all for your attention this marvelous evening. We will be back soon with new episodes. Stay safe.